Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congressman Dusty Johnson. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to speak with you today because, as you know, President-elect Donald Trump's comments on the U.S. reclaiming the Panama Canal have sparked international attention, and you are introducing a bill on the subject called the Panama Canal Repurchase Act of 2025. So to kick off the conversation, can you tell us a little bit about your bill?
Yeah, I'm sure most of your viewers understand that America controlled that canal, managed it until 1999. So this is not ancient history we're talking about. And we know that the Chinese manage ports on both ends of the Panama Canal, both on the Atlantic and the Pacific side. We know that 40% of American cargo loads, container loads rather, go through the Panama Canal. We know that a tremendous amount of American energy and American grains go through the canal. It is hard to overstate the importance of the Panama Canal, and I think we just need to have a chief executive who's got the flexibility, who's got the authority to try to go find a willing buyer, willing seller, if that's the kind of thing that makes sense for both countries.
It doesn't look like Panama is a willing seller. I want to read some comments from Panama's foreign minister. They said, quote, "The only hands operating the canal are Panamanian, and that is how it's going to stay." And that, quote, "Our canal sovereignty is not negotiable." So what do you think those negotiations would even look like between the United States and Panama?
Well, first off, of course, Panama has not had that kind of highly resistant rhetoric when they're talking about having China manage both ends of the canal on those ports. And so I think we want to view this as just maybe a little bit of negotiating leverage, and maybe a deal wouldn't come to fruition, but there's simply no harm in evaluating it. I've cut a lot of deals in the private sector in my life, and sometimes just moments before a deal actually came together, it looked like it never would. That's why you got to get to the table and just figure out whether or not anything can really happen.
To your point, then, is this just tough talk? Is this tough rhetoric? Because President-elect Donald Trump last month said that the U.S. was being charged, quote, highly unfair fees for ships traveling through the canal, and that we are essentially being ripped off by Panama. So do you think that this would actually come to fruition, or do you think this is just tough talk to get Panama to the table to potentially lower those fees?
I don't know that it's just talk. It's not impossible to imagine that you could have an American company managing that canal. You could have the American government in charge of the ownership and the operation of the canal. That's not hard to imagine at all. I mean, the Chinese Communist Party, it may be that talking about one thing ultimately leads to something else, but I wouldn't foreclose the possibility of this actually happening.
I want to talk about the second component here, which is China. Panama's president has pushed back on saying China has no control over Panama or the canal. I spoke with Gordon Chang last week, who's an expert on U.S.-China relations, and he said there is a lot of Chinese influence on Panama, on the canal. So what about China's relationship with Panama concerns you?
I think we've seen that some uncertainty, some elevated risk in an area can seriously impact traffic. You look at the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, the danger from the Houthi rebels there, that reduced traffic through the Suez Canal by more than 65%. That had a seriously negative effect on prices and logistics for everybody across the whole world. I think we want to make sure that the Panama Canal remains a certain, predictable, reliable asset for American shipping. 73% of the traffic through that canal are either American imports or American exports. So this is a uniquely American issue, a uniquely American canal.
Your point, the canal is critical in the supply chain. So I know your bill is brand new, but what have your conversations looked like about the Panama Canal, specifically your bill, with your GOP colleagues and even across the aisle? Do you think you're going to have bipartisan support?
I think some of the reflection on my bill, which has largely been good, although those people that have a tendency to kind of shrug their shoulders or roll their eyes, I think view it as a part of the broader buying Greenland, making Canada a state, turning the Gulf of Mexico into the Gulf of America, kind of the broader theme about American power abroad. I think some of these ideas are stronger than others, and I think they should each be evaluated on their merits.
To your point about those ideas, President elect Donald Trump said to reporters that he's not ruling out the use of military force to reclaim the Panama Canal as well as claim Greenland. What's your thoughts on those comments?
My bill doesn't authorize an invasion, of course, and President Trump often will seek leverage in a negotiation where it doesn't otherwise exist. I don't know if that's what he's doing here, but I would tell you that I think he is a businessman, first, second, and third. To the extent that we're able to gain any particular foothold in the management of the ownership of the Panama Canal, I can tell you it would come through a business deal.
Your point, I know you said earlier in the conversation that you've had tough negotiations before in the private sector. You come to the table, you get a deal done. Is using military force or even suggesting that, is that a step too far? Critics have said that's Putin-esque. What do you think?
I know that the DC parlor game over the next 4 years will be parsing every phrase that the president-elect Trump makes. And I get it. If you're looking for somebody who's prim and proper, somebody who plays by diplomatic norms, he is most certainly not your guy. But I just learned after his first 4 years that if I spent all my time engaged in the kind of parsing of the rhetoric that so many other folks in this country like, that I wouldn't actually get anything done. So I just try to stay focused on what can we actually accomplish. And I think there are some real opportunities in a Trump presidency related to the border, related to trade, and related to making sure that we're projecting strength abroad so we can have a peaceful and more prosperous globe.
And related to the canal. So what do you think's next for your bill? I know it is brand new.
I think we're still trying to sort out what does that look.
Trump underlying challenge to his conviction is still pending, and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg urged the Supreme Court did have jurisdiction to even consider the emergency request to delay the sentencing. Trump was convicted in May of falsifying business records over payments to his then lawyer Michael Cohen to reimburse 1,300 hush money payment made adult film star Stormy Daniels in order to keep her from speaking out about alleged affair before 2016 election. The incoming president, who will be inaugurated in less than 2 weeks, is fighting his conviction, saying that it should be tossed because a conservative majority of Supreme Court in July ruled that former president are entitled to sweeping immunity for official action. Part of Trump in agreements was his trail, including evidence involving officials' action from his time in office, which under the Supreme Court immunity decision would ordinarily be barred from reaching a jury. Prosecutors counted that those concerned could be hashed out on appeal. Merchant rejected that agreement in December, ruling that the evidence presented by Manhattan District Attorney officer was not related to Trump official conduct as president. Trump attorney told Supreme Court that having deal with sentencing would distract from his transition to power and potentially jeopardize national security. Defending criminal legislation at all stages, especially at defending a criminal